everyone. Thank you for hanging in there with us. We had some technical difficulties, as to be expected, I suppose, in the age of video conferencing, but we do have two of our panelists on. We have Russell Shaver. He's a consulting engineer for the electric vehicles and emerging technology team at Austin Energy. And we have Dave Maggio, the director of market design and analytics at ERCOT. We may have our other panelist, Teron Hill, the director of asset development and policy for U.S. transmission at National Grid, join us if he can get on. But if not, we will have Russell and Dave to be our panelists today. So Russell, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And Dave, thank you for getting on.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So I actually wanted to start off with a curveball, as if we haven't had enough curveballs already. We had been promoting this panel on social media, and somebody actually sent me a message yesterday, and I kind of wanted to get you guys' response to it, or kind of your thoughts. And so the message I received in kind of in response to our panel abstract was, I saw your post regarding the word intermittency. I recently heard someone suggest that the term variability be used instead of intermittency with respect to renewable energy, because generation can be forecasted with around the same level of certainty as load. The connotation around the term intermittency, unreliability, dysfunction, etc., are a good reason to consider an alternative to the term. So, I mean, do you guys have any reaction to that? The wanting to use the word, variability as opposed to intermittency when talking about renewables?
So I guess I'll start out. Not sure I quite understand the nuance, although I kind of understand the connotation concern. I mean, I will say, I think to a large degree, I've heard the term variability used a lot more frequently, in particular relation to ERCOT and thinking about the renewables that we actually have on the Baltimore electric system. And I think a lot of it ties to some of the points that were being made. It's a slight twist on risk that we face around supply generation, but it is something that you can try to manage around. So whether it's forecasting, whether, I think we're going to talk a little bit later in the panel about what we do in terms of reserves and sort of things that we do to prepare for some of that variability. I mean, those are all things that you can manage. And I do think in general over the last handful of years that the industry has gone more in that direction in that terminology.
I don't really have too much to add to that. It does seem kind of like semantics. I suppose if intermittency is power physically going out versus variability, maybe you have a drop in voltage or something like that. I guess I can see that. With my engineering mind, we could spend the next hour on trying to figure out the difference between those two. I don't want to get the audience dragged down into that.
All right, very good. Thank you for humoring me with that. So let's get into the list of questions I sent you guys. So it's really good, actually, because you have two different perspectives. Dave, you can really talk to market and market design, and Russ, you're an engineer, so you can speak to kind of some of the technical issues around this topic. So my first question, and Russ, I'll have you give the first go at it, and then Dave, but what do you see as some of the biggest challenges of energy storage today, specifically related to replacing traditional centralized generation?
Yeah, I guess since you give me first shot, I'll just take the easy answer. Sorry, Dave, but cost is obviously something that's basically one of the number one things. I think the barriers we're trying to get past. At this point, I think we're getting close, especially when you talk about grid level, so-called bulk level wholesale in front of the meter. I think those costs, that magic number we're all looking for, $100. We're getting pretty close to that with that level. Once you start to get into commercial and, distributed sort of energy storage, now we're getting further away from that. So to me, that's probably the biggest barrier. I'll say the second one before I hand it off to Dave. Is I have quite an extensive background in sustainability, and in sustainability, we like to talk a lot about environment, economics, and sort of the social equity of it. And I feel like over the years I've been doing this, the social equity part has been one of the things lacking. And I think one of the barriers is how we get access for say lower income people. And you would think in bulk maybe it's a little easier. I'll say in Austin Energy we've got community solar where we try to tackle that problem, where people who simply can't afford a solar system, and you can think about pairing it with storage. Basically, they can sort of buy into a piece of that at a very special rate, a low rate. So that's two things that pop into my mind immediately.
And I guess I'll take a different twist on it, and perhaps this is a little what I'm focused on right now that is a little too easy, as very different than some of the things that Russell was talking about. One of the biggest concerns that we're honestly working through is that up until recently, a lot of the rules for participation, the models for how these things are get involved with and interact with the markets and the grid more generally, they just weren't in place, and not really a lot of the existing sort of more familiar models and rules. They may apply, but they weren't specifically designed for storage, and it's just taking some time to kind of get there. And I guess when I talk about models, I'm thinking fairly broadly. There's the components of participation in interaction minute to minute and second to second with the grid, right? So there's that type of modeling. It could also kind of tie to how it participates in sort of unit commitment and dispatch models. So kind of now you're getting a little bit more into the market side of things. And then you get into even further out for things like, how do I plan for future transmission? What do I want to expect in terms of I'm looking at my resource adequacy for the next couple of years? What does that mean for energy storage and this particular device that really just has some differences to it that aren't really applicable? And specifically the duration limitation is really the kind of thing that's particularly unique as we're thinking about some of those processes and how we consider these types of resources along with all the others in all those types of studies and modeling.
Yeah, Dave, you talked about the challenge of modeling energy storage on our prep call. Anything else to add on that? What are some of the main challenges of modeling energy storage?
I think it probably ties down, at least from my point of view, to what do you do with the fact that it's duration limited, and that there's lots of ways to handle it, but it's just something fairly unique. And one of the big questions that I think a lot of the ISOs are facing is this question of whether or not the state of charge is managed by whoever's representing the resource and owns it. Is it their responsibility and their prerogative to manage that? Or is that something maybe they want a little bit of help from the ISOs on, how far do we want to get into that business? So, I think that's certainly one point of it. One of the other pieces too is simply not necessarily really having a good understanding of what the duration limitations might be. That's actually not something that fits well into some of our existing registration information. And so even just collecting this new information, that wasn't something that we really thought we needed to think about as actually something that could play a major role as we're, again, thinking of both those near-term questions of dispatch, as well as kind of those longer-term questions of building out the transmission, looking at our resource adequacy, those longer term questions.
So it sounds like it's really gonna vary between markets, based off what utilities in certain markets can do and how those markets operate. There's not really going to be one solution across the board for the whole nation.
Well, I guess I will say, I think a lot of folks are going down similar paths. You have, groups like EPRI that's bringing together the ISOs and we're talking about those participation models and trying to learn from each other. Someone kind of has to be the first, but you also want to take advantage of that when someone ends up being the first. I will say, just because the rules have so much nuance and difference to them between the varying ISOs, there probably isn't an absolute plug and play solution. But I do think in many cases you're going to see a lot of similarities in terms of the approaches that the ISOs take.
Very good. Russell, I know that you're not into the market side, but anything that Dave said that's brought about thoughts from you on kind of this challenge of modeling energy storage?
Yeah, I'm actually glad that Dave brought up the ERCOT rules. I didn't want to go there because Dave seems like a nice guy and want to keep this friendly. But so, as an example, we have 2 grid scale batteries right now that are 1.5 megawatts, and we were disappointed to find out that, as Dave will surely know, they cannot participate in lowering our 4CP costs because they're too large according to the ERCOT rules. Which cut off at a megawatt. So Dave, I need you to get on that right away and change those rules after this call so we can go ahead and do that. And then the other thing I was going to mention, because you touched on, as we talk about modeling and control in particular, the integration costs, our experience of any level, but of course, once you get to bulk level, the integration of controls with at the utility, the ADMS, and many other systems we have can be extensive at this point. I think you used the term plug and play, and we are not there yet at all, not even remotely close to plug and play. And to me, that is a significant cost.
Russell, I mean, if we're not even remotely close to plug and play, is that even really an option, or you think it's very distant future before plug and play becomes a reality?
Yeah, I don't know, especially at that scale, well, when you can ever get to true plug and play, the stern definition. I think we could do a lot better. There's a lot of work underway now with just standardization, open protocols, is a huge step forward, and they're ongoing at this point. At the different levels of communication, that alone, I think, is going to make a big difference. But having gone through it with some of our demonstration projects, it's been a painful process and very long process as we got started before these open standards really were even fleshed out.
Dave, any response to Russell? Are you guys going to have a knockdown, drag out fight on this panel?
I'm not sure how much we're working on several rules. I'm not sure if that's one that we're really have our hands on at this point, but I think we'll be okay for at least the next 15 minutes or so.
Very good. Russell, I wanted to talk to you about a project that you've spent quite a bit of time on, and we've covered a little bit of it at Zpryme, which is the Austin Shines project. Can you tell us about that project? Give us a broad overview, and then maybe I'll ask some follow-up questions based off, the overview and your role in that project.
Sure. This was started out as a 3-year project. It's kind of been extended and become a 4-year project. We received a grant from DOE for roughly $10 million to demonstrate how we could use storage on the grid to facilitate higher densities of solar. As probably a lot of people are aware that are watching this right now, once you get somewhere in the neighborhood of, say, 40% of solar penetration, say on a feeder, you can start experiencing problems with congestion and so forth. I know in Hawaii they've had that issue, and even I think reached a point where they weren't allowing people to connect more solar. So that was kind of the intent, and we pitched a proposal looking at doing this. Part of the requirements were coming in with a solution that was less than 14 cents LCOE, so levelized cost of energy. We kind of, at the beginning of it, we went back to DOE and said, rather than looking at the levelized cost of energy of the technology, let's look at everything as a system. And we think we can come in well under that 14 cents. So we proposed storage at every level. So as I kind of mentioned before, we have 2 grid scale batteries. One is at a substation, and another one is actually in a park in Mueller for the public. So that's sort of our public demonstration project. They're both roughly about 1.5 megawatts. One's a little bit smaller. The one at the Kingsbury substation is actually co-located with a 2 megawatt solar community solar farm. They're not directly connected, but they're both sitting there at the substation. Then we have 3 commercial properties where we installed various size systems. I want to say one of them was 18 kilowatts and the other one was 72 kilowatts. The other two, I'm sorry, were 72 kilowatts. They are behind the meter. Both of those, all 3 of those facilities, I'm sorry, have storage as well. Then we have, on the residential side, we have 24 homes, and on 6 of those homes, we installed 5 kilowatt energy storage systems, and they all have solar as well. We replaced the inverters and on those homes to be able to control that solar as well. And it was, I'll say in a nutshell, it was a 3-year project. It took, back to our point, I think what we first talked about, it took about a year just to get all the players in place, from Doosan to even just our main partners at Pecan Street is sort of our aggregator on the residential side, and on the commercial side, we're STEM. But it took about a year just to get in place contracts and agreements with everybody to make this work. And we've kind of reached the point where we've submitted a report to DOE, which is available publicly now, I believe. And we are trying to figure out now, how do we transition all of this storage that we've installed? Hence my question to Dave about changing the rules. How do we transition that now to operations, now that we're sort of moving from a demonstration to an operations?
Yeah, and so Russell, if you could maybe narrow it down to 2, maybe 3 key lessons learned from the Shines project, what would those be?
Well, probably some things that we touched on already. I guess I would say one of the key lessons is that integration piece. Making sure for projects like this that you build in a significant amount of time to account for that integration, and I guess related to that, specifying open protocols. We tried to do that as much as we possibly could. Part of the reason for that, especially on the commercial side, is we wanted to avoid the so-called vendor lock-in that you can get when a vendor uses proprietary protocols to control their systems. And then if you want to go to another vendor later, there's no way to control it. And we were successful with that, I guess I will say. At the time we did this, some of those open standards were just not fleshed out enough to be able to do that. So I think of those 2 things, those are probably 2 of the main lessons. I mean, there's many, many more I could probably go into, but those are probably 2 of the main ones.
Thank you, Russell. And where can we find more information on Austin Shines? On Austin Energy's website, on the DOE website?
It is absolutely on both. There's write-ups and videos. You can always contact me. And like I said, we've submitted the report. I'm not sure it's publicly available yet. I may have misspoke when I said that, but it will be soon.
Okay, thank you, Russell. So, Dave, I think what we're really talking about is, what does the future of the grid look like? Like, what does the system look like in the future? So, 2-part question for you here. How do you plan for the future? How do you kind of assess where you are now and plan for what you need to get there? And what does maybe that envision look like? Dave, I can't hear your audio. You may be muted.
I didn't want to interrupt Russell. Sorry about that. And I guess for folks who may be a little bit more engaged with, utilities and things of that nature, and a little less with the ISO, really we're not engaged in planning out a specific resource mix. So just to kind of set the stage, that's really where we're at. What we're trying to focus on is, particularly thinking about it from my area, is what do we kind of see coming, and honestly, kind of what's already here, and we're playing a little bit of catch up, but trying to set up the rules and design and the incentives so that we're kind of moving in the right path and really reflecting the types of things that we need to maintain a reliable grid, and specifically on the transmission side. So I guess the kind of talk about how we're planning for it, it's really about trying to focus on some kind of key areas, and particularly thinking about those rules and system changes in design. And right now, for folks who maybe not plugged into ERCOT as a market, there's sort of three main categories that we're focused on. Now, the primary one, and it kind of fits in well, of course, to this session, as well as I think some of the questions, is really focused on specifically not just energy storage, but on battery energy storage, just sort of that shorter duration type of storage that we see on the system. And honestly, part of that is simply that's where we see a lot of the interest in people building and people trying to bring to the market. And so that's where we're focusing on some attention when it specifically comes to storage technologies. Along with that, and actually with a fair amount of overlap, is things tied to resources on the distribution system. Now, a lot of that could be storage, but not necessarily. Similarly to some of the things that we were talking about with models for energy storage, we're not necessarily well set up, or at least haven't historically been well set up to be in a place where we can have distributed resources, things down in the distribution system, participate in the wholesale markets. So trying to make sure we're looking at any barriers, any sort of rule gaps and things like that, and address them. And then kind of finally, as we're thinking about moving and continuing to develop a first-rate electricity market, is another change that's indirectly related, but it's our move to real-time co-optimization of energy and ancillary services. This is something that a lot of the other markets do. I guess for folks who maybe are a little less familiar with it, where it really ties in is that we feel it's going to really open the door for increased participation. And there's some nuances to it specifically that I think open it up well for batteries like storage that have some time limitations on them. So I guess those are kind of the key areas, and really where we see everything kind of moving towards. But I guess the key part in all those is thinking about what the grid really needs, and are we telling that to people and how we design our markets. In part, we kind of have a market, or kind of have a grid, where a lot of those attributes were just kind of innate in the resources that existed and were being built. And trying to recognize that maybe was just sort of luck or design, or again, just the practice at the time, and trying to really challenge ourselves and rethink about those.
Thanks, Dave. So I believe we will get kicked off at 2:50, and I know that this was a short panel because of our technical difficulties up front, but I'm seeing a lot of questions come in around electric vehicles. And Russell, I know we wanted to talk a little bit about just the decentralized nature of the distribution grid and how more decentralized it's becoming. So just kind of share your thoughts, Russell, on electric vehicles, how they impact the distribution grid, how they kind of impact, storage replacing, traditional centralized generation in general.
Yeah, that's a big question for 2 minutes. I guess this is the lightning round. I guess I will quickly say that Austin Energy itself has really, over the years I've been there almost 30 years, and one of the things I've loved about Austin Energy is just embracing all this new technology. A lot of utilities, sort of, as someone talked about earlier today, maybe saw a lot of these as a threat, where Austin Energy has always viewed these things as an opportunity for sure. And electric vehicles themselves are kind of an interesting case, right? Because we talked a lot about replacing bulk storage, and when you think about that, you're probably thinking about large systems put in one place, just kind of like traditional generator. But at Austin Energy, we kind of have an outlook of all the above, and we hope to see in the future where we have vehicles that can do vehicle to grid, providing everything from local power to grid services. Once we reach a point, I think right now we're only at about 12,000 vehicles. We have a very robust distribution grid, so we don't really have any issues with vehicles. I think the last estimate we saw was we could get up to 100,000 vehicles and still be fine with our grid. But we have tackled at least the idea that everyone would come home and plug in at the same time and cause new peaks at the end of the day. We really haven't seen that. And even so, we've instituted a special rate where people charge off peak and pay a less price than if they charge at that time. It's kind of there's a rate that's a one size. You pay just a flat fee, and you can charge anytime except those peak times. And we feel like that's always the way to sort of, rather than set up rules and force our customers into something, it's always giving them a choice and an incentive to sort of nudge them into the way we would prefer them to see. I don't know if that really answers your question, but like I said, this is could be a long answer.
Well, I have good news. We have had our time extended, so we're not going to get kicked off at 2:50. So what did you cut out that you'd like to touch
on? I'm just really excited about that distributed. I guess that distributed model in the future. Like I said, we don't really think about that too much for replacing bulk power. But it obviously takes, when you get to that level, it's going to take integration. You can sort of use the variability that you get once you get to literally hundreds of thousands of devices out there. An example being our demand response programs, which I oversaw for a few years, and we had well over 100,000 of those. Once you get that sort of diversity and you partner with aggregators, that becomes almost looks like a bulk load, right? And you can do things with that you can't do with just onesie twosies. But I think there's real potential, particularly with electric vehicles, because now you dual purpose. We talk a lot about the price of storage. It's difficult to pin down the value streams. One thing I didn't talk about with Shines, we identified 19 different possible value streams from storage, and we modeled 6 of them for various reasons. But we know that still storage, it's got a cost problem. So we want to tackle as many of those value streams as we can. And of course, vehicles, you can get one more rather than just using it for transportation. Once you can plug it into the grid and get more value out of it, I see huge potential in that.
Dave, when you guys think about this more, I guess, distributed model, what is top of mind for ERCOT? What do you see as, potential challenges that certainly need to be addressed? Maybe what are potential benefits of it? What is the topic of conversation focus on when you think about this more distributed model?
Yeah, I mean, I think the benefits are there, and a lot what Russell was describing. I mean, I think if you're able to find a way to effectively aggregate it, you can have it effectively look like a power plant or a load that's able to really participate and do all the things that you'd hope it could be able to do. Sort of that magic, magic unicorn or whatever you want to call it, of actually having like elastic load, right? That we've always talked about with electricity markets. And I guess kind of the part that I think we've seen some struggling with up to this point is that effective aggregation part. How does someone kind of control all those in an effective way and in sort of bulk? And I think one of the things that we struggle a little bit with at the the higher ISO level is if you have a bunch of very, very small batteries all responding, how can we validate that we're getting the response that we're needing, and that type of piece of it as well. So how do you start thinking about performance and fairness and things like that along those lines? But we have actually had some cases where we've tried to set up even some rules around load aggregation and things like that, but it's just been has not been cost effective as of yet to try and really put them into serious practice.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because you have to, you have to make sure that those batteries are responding, right? I don't know if you guys were on an earlier session, but we had a panelist talking about, reliability is very important. especially if you're a Texan in the middle of the summer, you want your air conditioner to come on, as much as you want clean energy, but you also want to not be sitting in your house or apartment and sweating because it's 100 degrees inside. So I guess my question is, whose responsibility is it to determine if those batteries are responding, and how do you see kind of those responsibilities playing out across the ISO, across the utility, maybe some of these startups that are, innovating with this new technology? How do you kind of work, I guess, how do you create an ecosystem to where everybody's focused on that problem and everybody's kind of doing their part to make sure that it gets solved?
Well, I guess I'll start. Maybe Russell has some thoughts on it too. It certainly feels like a bit of a shared responsibility, and I'll use sort of the cop-out answer. And the reason I say that is, again, just in the way we're typically viewing the grid, we're focused on the bulk electric system. So, these types of load are really hidden way down in what ERCOT sees. The solar panels that on the top of my house, or what Austin Energy does with my thermostat. I live in Austin. It's all good. I think it's all helpful to the grid, but it's really kind of masked down. So there's a question of, certainly you want to verify, but how do you verify in a cost-effective way? Because we also can't require, some sort of aggregator to send telemetry for every single resident that they have control to or access to. So, that we have to kind of work together to find ways to do it, but to do it in a cost-effective way that really makes sense.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. It's a complicated problem without a doubt. As optimistic as I am, I recognize the complexities, and you can sort of imagine if you've got 100,000 fixed storage units in homes, that in and of itself, getting that data is immensely challenging. Now imagine these being mobile, and at any moment someone can decide they need to use their car and they're going to go unplug, and that drops off. So it becomes immensely complicated. And I think he's right that the responsibility of it, it sort of depends on incentives and I guess the market to some extent. I sort of see, again, I go back to aggregators. We've used them in demand response. They're good at what they do, especially with these smaller loads. It's a cost that they're very familiar with how to handle. So I kind of see that as probably the most logical route that this will take. But it's certainly a bit of an unknown, since with electric vehicles in particular, we're still in kind of the infancy. We don't even really have vehicle to grid at this point, right? We did that with Shines. We had one car where we did vehicle to grid, and we literally, to accomplish that, I will say, I guess I will use the word hacked into the charging system to get it to work and get it to do what it needed to do. So we're still a little ways away from that, but vehicle manufacturers are definitely thinking about this. It's happening in other countries, and I know there are plans to roll it out. So again, at Austin Energy, we look at this as an opportunity. It's going to be a huge challenge with these sort of mobile loads, but again, we're pretty excited to step up to the challenge.
And actually, real quick, I think that maybe there's one little piece of that, maybe sort of a first step. Russell mentioned one first step. Some of what we've seen recently is getting customers more engaged with what's going on the bulk electric system and in the wholesale markets. I think maybe that might be where we see some baby steps that would open the door for more aggregation and more participation directly, as opposed to right now it's a little real more of that indirect, and even that's very small.
So we are going to close at 3. And since you guys are both based in Austin, I'm going to ask this question. Cybertrucks are about to be manufactured in Travis County. I know from, experience researching EVs that one of the biggest barriers for EV adoption in Texas specifically is there's not a good pickup truck option for Texans. Texans love pickup trucks, and they're going to drive their trucks, and they're not going to go electric unless there is a truck to do so. So what do you think about, the manufacturing of Cybertrucks in Texas? There's also rumors that maybe there will be more research into battery technology in Texas. So any general thoughts on, what that may mean for Austin, what that may mean for the Texas market if, in 2 years we do see an a spike in EVs because there are, pickup trucks now available. I just, any closing thoughts on this? We have 2 minutes.
I guess I will say I think the jury's going to be out on this a while. I've not seen one of those trucks up close. I've seen pictures of it, and I tend to think a lot of people that buy trucks, I'm not sure that sort of style is going to be something they will jump at. Early adopters like myself think it's really cool, but I'm also sort of realistic on, I don't know how quickly truck owners will take something that's that radical of a redesign. So I don't know. It's exciting to obviously. I think having the Tesla presence here in Austin is going to help even push forward with what we already have one of the strongest electric vehicle programs in the country. Giving a little plug to Carl there. I know when you introduced me on my bio, it said I'm part of the electric vehicles group. I've moved into the DER integration group, but my heart belongs to Carl and electric vehicles. So I'll give a plug there and say, with all the chargers we have in the city, with it, we're ready. We're ready for these vehicles. So if they can succeed anywhere, I think Austin will be the spot.
Thanks, Russell.
And certainly, and having more a greater presence and more options seems like it's only going to increase it. We'll see the speed of that increase, but you have to imagine it's going in that direction.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so that actually closes us out. Thank you, the audience, for sticking with us and 20 minutes late. Thank you, Russell, Dave, for joining me on this panel. Really appreciate your insights.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.